Traditions sermon series, The Moses Generation. Now, here's what I want to do. We put the Moses Generation on there on the sermon title because of this. Sam and I we collaborate every week. We organize, we plan the sermon, and then we go home and we let the Lord lead us individually on the Holy Spirit in that direction. He messaged me yesterday, and he said, or the day before, and said, "What's the name of this title sermon?" Or sermon title. And I told him, and he said, "I don't understand that." And I realized we had a generational gap. So for this service today, I'm retitling it, "Don't Slop Your Dripper." Don't slop your dripper. And I'm going to tell you why here in just a second. But don't slop your dripper. See, some of you may remember in the 70s, maybe into the 80s, there was a comedy show called Hee Haw. I grew up with Hee Haw. Now, I'm sorry, I don't apologize for that. I grew up with Hee Haw, and there was a guy on there named Archie Campbell. Now, Archie would tell stories, and he would twist it around. And he would tell the story of Rendersella. So I'm going to read you the story of Rendersella. And I hope you enjoy it as told by Archie Campbell from years ago. Once upon a time, in a Corin country. Are you with me? All right. There lived a very beautiful girl. And her name was Rendersella. Now, Rendersella lived with her mugly other and 2 sad blisters. See, is it not better to tell it this way? It's so much more enjoyable to tell. And in this same Corin country, there was a very pransome hens. And this pransome hens was going to have a bancy fall. And he had invited people from miles around, especially the pitch reaple. Now, Rendersella's mugly other and her 2 sad blisters went out to buy some drancy fesses to wear to the bancy fall. But Rendersella, she couldn't go. Because she didn't have anything to wear, and all she had was some old ruddy dags. Finally, the night of the bancy fall arrived, and Rendersella couldn't go. So she just cat down and shried. So she was a kitten there shrying, when all at once there appeared before her Gary Fodmother. And he touched her with his wagic mond. And there appeared before her a sig boach and Hicks white sources to take her to the bancy fall. But now he said to Rendersella, "Rendersella, you must be home before midnight, or I'll turn you into a tumpkin." I mean, this is serious stuff. When Rendersella arrived at the bancy fall, the pransome hens met her at the door because he had been watching behind a wooden window. And Rendersella and the pransome hens danced all night until midnight. And they lell and fluv. Some of us here, I have a lell and fluv story. Lell and fluv. And finally, the mid-clock struck night. And Rendersella staced down the rares. And just as she beached the bottom, she slopped her dripper. She slopped her dripper. And the next day, the pransome hens went all over the Corin country looking for the beautiful girl who had slopped her dripper. Finally, he came to Rendersella's house. He tried it on Rendersella's mugly other, and it didn't did. Then he tried it on her two sad blisters, and it didn't did. Then he tried it on Rendersella, and it did. It was exactly the sight rise. So they were married, and they lived happily ever afterwards. Now the story of the story is this: if you ever go to a bancy fall and you want to have a pransome hens loll and fub with you, don't forget to slop your dripper. Just don't forget to slop your dripper. Now, I am titling this sermon, "The Moses Generation, Don't Slop Your Dripper." So here we are. Someone has to be the conduit for connection. Now, I'm going to tell you, think about this. Somebody has to be the conduit for connection. You say, no, we don't. Somebody doesn't have to be, I don't have to have a conduit to connect to me. I'm going to give you an example. You have a parent that connected you to your grandparent. So in other words, you say, I like my grandparent. I don't want my parent. It ain't happening that way. You have a connection that connects you to your grandparents. See, Rendersella, she slopped her dripper. She slopped her dripper. That's what connected her to her Pransom Hence. She was connected to a handsome prince because she left something behind. So here's two questions I want to present today. Who's connecting us to God? Who is connecting us to God? And who are we connecting to God? See, there's two big questions. Who is the one that's connected us to our Heavenly Father? And who is the one that we're connecting? Who's the ones that are watching us? Who are the ones that we're connecting? See, there's a generation that gave more than their fair share. For so many years, they came. For so many years, they gave. For so many years, they did that so we can have a Jesus experience today. They gave so we could have a Jesus experience today. And for us, somebody slopped a dripper and connected us to God. That's why we're here. We have a church on the square in Sparta, Tennessee, at 9/11, by the way, 8 o'clock traditional service. So anyway, we have a church on the square in Sparta, Tennessee, because somebody slopped a dripper some time ago. Somebody made a connection years ago. Somebody made a connection, and I'm going to kind of lay that connection out for you, and I'm going to tell you. Tina and I, first of all, we'll kind of set this up. Tina and I have worked with leaders, young leaders, for 30-something years. We've worked with young leaders, and we loved every bit of it. To be able to work. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but Pastor Hannah and Tina and I, we have a little bit of an age difference. She's not the same age as we are. I hope you didn't notice that, but she's not the same age. Lacey and Thomas and these guys, none of these guys, they're all younger than us. We have had the opportunity to work with some of the most powerful and dynamic youth and young leaders especially in our Upper Cumberland, and I believe in the world. So, for a brief time, though, I want to tell you what happened for a brief time. Not recently, some time ago. For a brief time, we had a little hiccup. This is what we began to start noticing. Our younger people, our younger leaders, started to get a mentality that here is us and here is them. See, we have an us mentality and a them mentality. So what are you saying there? See, this is what they said. They said, we're the Joshua generation. Now, I'm a Joshua guy. I've been teaching, preaching, and studying Joshua. I could dive in the book of Joshua and never come out of it. I am a Joshua guy. I love the book of Joshua, and I want you to know I'm a Joshua generation. But they say, I'm a Joshua generation. Man, I'm different. We're us and they're them. See, this is what they say. They're the Moses generation. They know more about God. We give them that, but we know how to worship. That's what they said. They know more about God, but we know how to worship. This is what we were finding. They called these people, the older generation, the mature generation, they called them the Moses generation. The Moses generation, and this is what they said, and it broke my heart. The Moses generation needs to learn how to worship God. Needs to learn how to worship God. That's like telling an old carpenter he needs to learn how to build a house. The older Moses generation needs to learn how to worship God. And Tina and I went to work. We realized we had some work to do. So the Joshua generation, like I said, I consider myself one of those. You know what? It's not the age, it's the mentality. It's where you feel like you are in your walk with the Lord. See, the Joshua generation, they crossed the Jordan. They saw stuff the Moses generation didn't. The Joshua generation worshiped the Lord passionately. The Joshua generation conquered Jericho. Look at that feat in the Lord. The Joshua generation conquered cities, conquered kings that came after them, armies 5 at a time, and they won. See, but somebody had to be the one to pass this mantle down to these people, had to be the one to pass the mantle down to the Joshua generation, and it was the Moses generation that did that. It was the Moses generation. So let me just tell you, the bottom line is, without the Moses generation, there would be no Joshua generation. Without the Moses generation, there would not be a Joshua generation. So I'm going to show you what Moses did. I'm going to show you what Moses did, and then we're going to look at 5 key points. 5 key points. I mean, I'm like, yes, key point, man. We got to get back on track. 5 key points of Moses that built the platform that we stand on today. I want you to look at it with me. We have one set of scriptures this morning. Exodus chapter 19, verses 3, 4, 5, and 6. While Moses went up to God. We could stop right there because everything I'm about to talk about is that. While Moses went up to God, while he did this, the Lord called to him. While he went up to God, the Lord called to him out of the mountain, and he said, "Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob and tell the people of Israel." Tell the people, those 2 million more than likely people at the foot of the mountain. Tell them, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians. You saw this. We've just come out of Egypt. And how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you out. Now, therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, if you'll do these things, you shall be my treasured possession among all the people. For all of the earth is mine. Nothing escapes God. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a kingdom of a holy nation. And these are the words that you're supposed to speak to these people that are my people. So I want you to go back to that very first verse. While. That means there's something going on, 2 things at one time. While Moses went up. While Moses went up. So in other words, during his ascent to God, God called to him. Now, here's the bottom line. Here's every bit of this sermon. I mean, every bit of this scripture. If we want to know what God is saying, here it is. My daughter asked me one time, "Daddy, how do you know?" It's been years ago. "Daddy, how do you know when God's speaking to you?" And I'm going to tell you the answer to that question. It's right here. It's not rocket scientist. It's as plain and simple as we could ever find it. If you want to know what God is saying, don't turn to your neighbor and say, "Hey, can you tell me what God's saying? Because I'm out of it. You know, I got ADHD. I can't pay attention. You know, I can't. You don't even have to turn to your pastor or your teacher. You don't have to. Here's the answer to the question. Start moving toward God. It's no more plain than that. While he ascended to God, God spoke to him. If we want to know what God is saying, if we want to know the heart of God, if we want to hear what God is saying, the closer we get to him, the clearer his voice becomes. Now, there's a friend of mine sitting here in this service today that told me he used to hang out with my son all the time at my house. They was always messing stuff up. And he told me one time this, I'll never forget it. He said, when my daddy grabbed that belt and started whipping me, he said, I learned real fast, the closer I get to my father, the less reach he has, and the belt don't hurt as bad. Right there, right, Caleb? And you know what? I'm sitting here I was an associate youth pastor at the time, and I'm sitting here thinking to myself, I can't stand him. He has just preached a sermon that I'm going to have to steal now. So anyway, the closer we get to the Lord, the least the whipping hurts. You want to hear what God's saying? Get closer to Him, because the farther away we get from Him, the more we mess up and the more whippings we get. So if you want to get close, if you want to hear what He's saying, get closer. So that's it. That's the sermon. But I'm going to move on. Moses went up Mount Sinai. So this is what's happened. Moses has led Israel out of Egypt. Led them out. Plagues, all that stuff. Went through the desert. Followed the Lord. Went to the edge of the Red Sea. Army about to get them. They go through the Red Sea. And now they are found themselves at the edge or the bottom of Mount Sinai. A couple of million people find themselves at the base of the mountain. And Moses goes up on top of Sinai. So let me tell you what the word Sinai means. It means to shine. It means divine truth. Some say the word means sin. So to shine, divine truth, and sin. So Moses' last 40 years of his life, he was 80 years old, and he led Israel until he was 120 years old. And if you're not good with math, then just get your phone out, get your calculator, 120 minus 8, that's 40 years. So 40 years, he had another mountain experience. And he went up to Horeb. And when he went up to Horeb, the word Horeb means, wrong page. The word Horeb means the sword. It means sword. So God bookended Moses' last 40 years of his life with pinnacles, with the mountain experiences. I'm going to tell you what that means. That's a pretty good sermon. We might just use it by itself one of these days. But see, here's the thing. We don't like to talk about the valley experiences. We don't like to talk about how bad it was. We don't like to talk about how we buried our family. We don't like to talk about the loss. We don't like to talk about these things. We like to talk about the pinnacle, the mountain experiences. So God bookended the last 40 years of Moses' life with two mountain experiences. One was Sinai to bring the glory that covers sin. That's what that word means. And the other was Horeb to show that the sword is about to have to be used to conquer the land. So here is what this time it was spent doing, covering the sin with the light of Jesus. Now we've got a mountain experience that says, Moses, now the sword has to be brought out of the sheath. So that's what I take. So key point number one, the Moses generation knows how to connect us to our victory. The Moses generation is the one that slops strippers real well. The Moses generation. Moses never set foot on the promise. Now get this with me. I want you to think about this, and I want you to think about people who have prayed for you. I want you to think about people who, grandparents or whoever, people who have spent time, people who have travailed, people who have been there for you. I want you to think about these people. Moses never set foot on the promise, not one time. He viewed it from Mount Horeb. That's the best he ever got. He never got to put his feet in the streams. He never got to taste the grapes. He never got to smell the grass or let the sun shine from that land on his face. He never got to do any of those things. It takes a special generation of leader. You got that person in your head? It takes a special generation of leader to lead people 40 years toward a dream they would never possess themselves. Think about that. Moses spent his life selling a vision for someone else to encounter. Man, Moses spent his life selling a vision for somebody else to encounter. What leadership. See, Cinderella, she slopped a dripper. This old girl slopped a dripper, and it connected something. It was a connector to connect her to her prince. Moses connected a nation. Get this. Moses connected a nation of slaves to the throne of God. Now, who are you? I want to ask you who you are. Because I'm pretty sure you're not a Billy Graham. I'm pretty sure you're not a Bible scholar. I'm pretty sure you're not your phone's not ringing off the hook to be the most powerful speaker for the Lord the world has ever known. You know what? It don't matter. It don't matter. Moses was the catalyst that connected a group of slaves to the throne of God, just like everybody else had the opportunity. That's how special that leadership was. Moses connected slaves to the throne of God. Key point number 2, the Moses generation, they don't look back. They don't look back. Moses didn't lead people out. I don't want to mess with your theology here, and I don't want to scare you to death, but Moses didn't lead people out of Egypt as much as he led them to God. See, I think we key in too much on the bad thing that we have to get rid of. Well, I can't get close to God because I have this thing, this pride, this rebellion, this whatever, this thing I can't get. See, in other words, we're focused too much on the Egypt experience. The Exodus mentality. See, we have an Exodus mentality. We think that these people left something behind that was bad. That's all behind. That's all water that washed under the bridge. It never was about what they left. It's about what they were getting ready to find. See, here's the thing. We, in this country, in our lives today, we have too much in our lives of a rearview mirror mentality. We have a rearview mirror mentality in our lives. Way too much. We focus too much on what we have to let go. I was driving in 1998. I had been beat down as badly as you could be beat down. Tina and I looked, if God takes the vines and trims back the branches that He don't want, then we look like a stump. I'm telling you, with suckers growing out of it. That's what we look like. And when I was driving home from Sweetwater, or from Spring City, Tennessee, driving up the mountain, looking through the rearview mirror, and I'm asking God, what in the world is going on? What have I done? And the Lord spoke to me, and see, I was going toward Him. I was moving toward Him, up the mountain, as a matter of fact. And God spoke just so softly to my spirit and said, it's not what you did. Stop looking through that rearview mirror. Your future's not back there. Start looking forward and moving forward. It's what I'm doing. I did this to get you to focus on me. I used this to get you where you are now. So focus on me through this. Stop living in the rearview mirror. Stop focusing on what we're leaving and start focusing on reaching God. That's what Moses did. Start focusing on discovering His promise. That's what the Israelites did. Start focusing on walking with Him. That's how they taught their people. That's what Moses focused on, and there never was a time that I can recall that Moses looked back at Egypt. After leaving Egypt, I don't read anywhere that he looked back. I can't find it. Even in the Red Sea experience, I don't see where. See, the people said, oh, if we could just give up and go back, at least we had something to eat there. At least no, you were slaves there. And the road to freedom sometimes has to be fought for. Even at the Red Sea, we've got the army right there. They let us go. Now they want to kill us. They're right there. Here's a cliff. Here's a cliff. There's a great big body of water called the Red Sea. What are we going to do now? Every single body, in my opinion, I'm going to picture it in my mind, everybody looked back. Oh, no. Everybody looked back. But I can't find where one guy named Moses looked back. He looked forward. And he kept his eyes on a path of dry ground that nobody else could see. Even he couldn't see it. But in his mind, he knew something was there. So that's what he keyed in on. Key point number 3. Moses changed God's mind. Moses changed God's mind. God was about to kill all them people. I want you to go with me on this one. Moses goes up Mount Sinai, spends a little over a month up there, comes back down. The glory of God shine on him. They put a veil over him. He's got the law of God in his arms, and the people have already, in that length of time, built a golden calf to worship at the foot of the mountain of God. And Moses comes down, and God says, I'm just going to kill them all and start all over. I'm going to give you some good people. Moses went to the throne of God and said, please give them another chance. Please. Moses changed God's mind. Think about that. He spoke to face, just like a man speaks to a man, the Word says. They had a relationship unlike any other man in the history of mankind. Anybody. Unlike anybody. Joshua, as a matter of fact, would tarry. The Word says he would tarry in the presence of the Lord. You know where that was? That was in the dark corner, in the dark shadows of the Moses and God meeting. When God and Moses were meeting, Joshua was in the dark corner, basking and worshiping. So yes, absolutely, Joshua generation people are worshipers. Man, they're worshipers. But the Moses generation are the ones that opens the door to the throne room that gets them in the corner. Don't ever forget that. The Moses generation are the ones that have the relationship that open the doors to begin with. Key point number 4. Moses longed to see God way more than he longed to lead a movement. Wow. Moses, the greatest leader, he took a nation of nobodies with no education, no skill sets, no warfare experience, and led them out of the most powerful nation on the face of the earth by the hand of God. And this guy longed to see God more than he longed to lead a movement. What a leader. Great moments, great opportunities, great victories. They can't come from great leadership abilities alone. They won't come from great leadership abilities. They flow out of great intimate moments spent with God. Think about it. If we want God to do more, get closer to Him and let the intimate moments flow out. That's how it happens. Key point number 5. Simple. God first. God first. Moses' job was never to win battles. That was as far as I can ever find, he never owned a sword or put one on his hip. Moses carried a stick. Moses wasn't, He wasn't the warrior. It wasn't his job to win battles. Here's what his job was, and he knew it, and he did it very well. His job was to teach a nation to put God first. That was his job. Because let me tell you something, we're not going to be able to build a nation unless we put God first, and then everything else we'll work on. But God first, God before conquest, God before battle, God before triumph, God before victory, and the quicker we learn that concept, the quicker our victories will come. So, see, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm about to tell you a story about my own trying to jump levels, and it don't work that way. God before conquest, God before battle, God before triumph, and God before victory. The presence of God always has to precede the fight if we want to win the fight. If you don't want to win the fight, then try it without the presence of God. But let me tell you, in the summer of 1999, I had a friend in Lenore City that he was in the Sunday school department, and I was in the Sunday school department at my church, and we would go to trainings and stuff together, and his name was Bill Robinson. I like this guy. I'm going to tell you, I just didn't fit in. I fit and did. I fit and did real well. You know what? I just didn't look like the rest of them. I didn't have a pedigree. I'm not saying that to be pity or to say anything against anybody. It was the truth. It was the cold hard fact. I just didn't fit in very well. I didn't. I was just a little bit. I was like the one. You look around the room and you got the one sitting at the table and the one sitting at the table, and they're talking, and then you got the one on the end. See, that one don't fit. You know what I mean? It's like something's different. He ain't the same color as the rest of everybody either. And that guy on the end didn't fit, but Bill Robinson liked me. Man, I liked that guy. Hey guys, you were doing this, and you stopped on us, and you watched us, and I appreciate it. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for spending some time with us. I pray that you enjoyed the service today. Let me take this opportunity to invite you out personally. We're located on the square in Sparta. Our service times are at 9 and 11 every Sunday morning. We'll meet you at the door with a hug. We'll meet you at the door with some coffee ready and some donuts if you want. And let me just take a real quick minute to invite you over to our Smithville campus. For those of you who can't drive over to Sparta, drive over to Smithville, 11 o'clock for now, at 614 Murphy Street in Smithville, Tennessee. So one of our campuses, Christ Point Church, we're real people, we're living real lives, and we're serving a real God. Welcome home.